The galaxy watched in silence. From the cold, indifferent vastness of space, observers traced the flickering lights of a blue planet, the cradle of a species long underestimated. Humans. Once dismissed as weak, primitive, and insignificant, they had endured countless skirmishes, threats, and dismissals, always on the periphery of galactic awareness. But now, the air of casual disdain shattered. Earth was bleeding fire, yet it was not kneeling, it was fighting back. Orbital outposts recorded the first signs with a mix of confusion and horror. Cities that should have crumbled instead glimmered with unnatural resilience. Factories, even under bombardment, churned steel, energy, and weaponry as if an unseen hand guided them. Drones swarmed like starlings, weapons deployed with meticulous chaos, civilian vessels converted into striking instruments of war. Analysts struggled to catalog patterns, but each counterattack defied prediction. Their instinct is madness, one whispered through comm channels, only for the voice to be swallowed by static and disbelief. It was not only the scale that terrified the observers, it was the logic behind the chaos. Humans adapted in hours to strategies that had taken other civilizations centuries to master. Every orbital strike, every ambush, every feint was designed not merely to survive, but to send a message. They would not be subjugated. Where other species calculated survival as their highest goal, humans acted with principle, improvisation, and audacity fused into a single, unstoppable force. Analysts noted the paradox. The human command structure seemed disordered, yet it functioned as a living organism, bending under pressure, absorbing blows, and retaliating with a fluid intelligence that no machine or psionic mind could anticipate. Then came the first wave. Primitive ships, barely armed, surged against fleets decades ahead in technology. Missiles launched from civilian platforms tore through shields like sparks across ice. Orbital stations, repurposed as weaponized fortresses, rained destruction on forces that had assumed victory was assured. Silence fell over the observation decks, replaced by whispers tinged with awe. "They do not fight because they must. They fight because they will," another analyst murmured, staring at the devastation with an emotion the galaxy seldom saw: fear. And in that fear, there was revelation. Perhaps humanity's greatest weapon was never its rudimentary ships, its reactive shields, or its unpredictable tactics. Perhaps it was something older, deeper, and infinitely more terrifying. The indomitable spirit of a species that refused to yield, that refused to accept erasure. From the ashes of their cities to the depths of space, the humans had declared a simple truth. The meek could erupt into a force no predator had ever anticipated. The galaxy, silent until now, began to shiver. The first counterattacks had only just begun. The void stretched endlessly, a black ocean punctuated only by the cold gleam of alien warships. They moved like predators, engines humming with the confidence of assured dominance. Sensors swept the darkness, mapping every vector, every anomaly, every potential threat. And yet, there it was again, a ripple in the void that should not exist. Humans. They appeared where they had no right to be. A transport freighter, assumed destroyed hours ago, emerged from the shadow of a gas giant, launching precision strikes on a squadron twice its size. Drones once intended for reconnaissance now danced in lethal patterns, intercepting missiles with an almost playful accuracy. Alien analysts scrambled, their instruments flaring with data they could not reconcile. Every calculated trap set for the humans failed, every ambush backfired. Observers whispered among themselves, disbelief seeping into what had once been calm analysis. "They thrive under pressure," one voice muttered, trembling. It was as if the humans absorbed each strike not as injury, but as instruction, learning, evolving, responding with methods that confounded logic. And yet they were not machines. They were raw, organic, chaotic. But in that chaos lay a precision that no algorithm could predict. Human ingenuity became terror incarnate. A cargo vessel, stripped of cargo, transformed into a missile of unimaginable scale. A cluster of civilian drones formed a surveillance web that tracked fleet movements light years away.
Debris from destroyed stations became floating minefields, lethal labyrinths that dragged alien ships into explosions of fire and metal. Analysts could not comprehend it. Survival was deliberate, tactical, and imbued with defiance. Something more unnerving emerged: courage. It radiated from the humans like heat from a forge, seeping into the sensors, into the very nerves of alien commanders. Entire fleets paused, hesitant, indecisive, unsure whether to press forward or retreat. In that hesitation, the observers recognized a truth long dismissed. The humans' refusal to submit had awakened something ancient, instinctual, and irrepressible. Fear, not just of loss, but of the unknown, crept into their ranks. And in the darkness between the stars, a single thought began to take hold among alien tacticians. The humans were not simply surviving. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson no strategy, no weapon could contain. Somewhere in that endless void, the humans waited, patient and unseen. And then, without warning, they struck again. From orbit, Earth was aglow of fire and smoke, a spectacle that should have signaled the end of a species. Cities glowed like molten cores, rivers of flame carving through what had once been civilizations. Alien observers adjusted their sensors, anticipating silence, despair, the quiet surrender of a planet on its knees. But the silence never came. Instead, the world throbbed with life. Beneath the clouds of ash, survivors emerged.
Children, elders, and soldiers alike clawed through rubble, carrying not only themselves, but tools, weapons, and hope. Factories, gutted and blackened, roared back to life, shielded behind improvised bunkers of metal and stone. Civic centers became command hubs, hospitals doubled as logistics nodes, and even parks and schools were fortified as defensive outposts. Observers noted, with growing unease, that every structure destroyed seemed to give birth to a dozen more points of resistance. Humanity was not merely surviving, they were transforming despair into strategy. The pattern became undeniable. Humans did not fight merely to endure, they fought to be remembered, to assert that they would not vanish quietly. Each counterattack carried a message as clear as any banner: we exist. Orbital bombardments intended to erase cities instead inspired innovations that confounded fleets. Missile trajectories were rerouted mid-flight, drones repurposed into swarming defense networks, and civilian vessels armed themselves with scavenged technology, turning ordinary trade into instruments of lethal defiance. Observers cataloged something unprecedented. Humans acted with unity in chaos, yet retained flexibility. They displayed compassion even in carnage, rescuing injured from ruins, sparing the defenseless, coordinating as if bound by an unspoken covenant. Their victories were not born of raw powerful alone, but of a collective moral will, a courage that the galaxy had rarely seen. And it was terrifying. This species gambled everything on instinct, principle, and sheer force of will. Alien fleets began to hesitate. Analysts murmured across channels. A species capable of this resilience could not be eradicated by conventional means. The human spirit, unpredictable, enduring, relentless, was emerging as a weapon far deadlier than any armament. From the inferno below, humanity watched, rebuilt, and struck once more. And the galaxy realized the war had only just begun. The void carried their whispers first, light-speed signatures of destruction and ingenuity that should not have existed. Alien fleets patrolled the outer systems with precision, confident that any threat would be visible, predictable, containable. And yet, reports began trickling in from the fringe. Convoys obliterated, orbital stations sabotaged, supply chains shattered in regions no human vessel should have reached. Analysts stared at the data in disbelief, their instruments struggling to account for what they were witnessing. Humans had become ghosts of war, striking with audacity and vanishing before a counterstrike could be organized. Observers could not find a pattern, and that was the pattern. Every engagement defied expectation. A trapped fleet broke free, a cornered vessel became the spearhead of an attack, drones converted into sensors and weapons mid-battle. It was not strategy alone, it was instinct, a preternatural sense of opportunity, weakness, and timing. The humans appeared fragile, yet in every recorded instance, they revealed themselves unstoppable. Fleets that had faced centuries of domination faltered before the unpredictability of these strange, unyielding beings. Whispers began in command chambers. Perhaps they did not merely fight to survive. Perhaps they fought to announce themselves to the galaxy, to mark existence itself as unyielding. Every victory carried meaning beyond its immediate effect. Destroyed stations became symbols, repurposed as beacons of resistance. Civilians took up arms alongside soldiers, improvising tactics that confounded the most advanced warships. Plans meant to suppress humanity instead inspired adaptation, improvisation, and audacious retaliation. Even fleets that should have struck decisively hesitated, their confidence eroded not by power alone, but by the strange audacity of a species unwilling to be subjugated. Observers began to see a frightening truth. Humanity had learned the language of the galaxy, and it spoke in ways no empire had anticipated. Its strikes resonated not just as military maneuvers, but as statements of defiance, of intent, of identity. Where other species might have sought dominion, humans demanded recognition. Where they might have fled under pressure, humans surged forward. And somewhere in that silence between the stars, the galaxy felt the tremor of their presence. The humans had begun to echo across the stars, and no fleet would hear the last of them. At the outer rim of human influence, alien commanders believed they had devised the perfect strategy: overwhelm, destroy, and erase. Entire fleets converged on strategic human hubs, their weapons arrays primed to unleash annihilation. The stations, planetary defenses, and orbital fortresses they targeted were meant to crumble under sheer force. Confidence radiated across every command deck. Victory, they assumed, was inevitable. And then the humans responded. Civilian transports became decoys, luring entire squadrons into ambushes where every projectile, every energy beam met resistance. Stations, appearing abandoned, detonated in orchestrated collapses that shredded armor and hulls alike. Planets, stripped of conventional defenses, revealed intricate networks of improvised turrets, camouflaged mines, and adaptive shielding. The galaxy's analysts, programmed to calculate probabilities in centuries, not hours, found themselves unable to keep pace. Desperation had become strategy. Chaos had transformed into lethal art. Humans displayed courage without discrimination. Children operated drones trained for reconnaissance and sabotage. Elders coordinate logistics with near military precision, guiding resources, directing reinforcements, and ensuring that no effort was wasted. Scientists, even in the shadows of devastation, devised countermeasures that rendered the aliens' most advanced weapons useless. Their refusal to surrender was absolute.
Even when encircled, when the odds stacked impossibly against them, humans struck with intent, leaving traps, misinformation, and lessons etched in fire and steel for any who dared pursue. Observers struggled to catalog the scale of human ingenuity. Each maneuver was audacious, each counterattack designed to confound expectations. No algorithm could predict the human response. No psionic insight could anticipate their next move. It was not merely survival, it was a statement. Humanity was reshaping the battlefield itself, rewriting the rules of engagement. Fear crept into the alien ranks. Admiration followed it immediately, inseparable, unavoidable. The species they had presumed fragile, chaotic, and insignificant had become a paradox, small yet unstoppable, endangered yet unbreakable. The siege, intended to end them, instead amplified their legend. From the shadows of the infinite reach, humanity waited, resilient and relentless, ready to strike again. And the next wave of chaos was already forming. For the first time in recorded galactic history, observers noticed a subtle, unsettling shift. The humans, once reactionary, seemingly disorganized, a species relegated to the margins, were no longer responding to aggression. They were initiating. Fleets that had once fled into the darkness now emerged from the black like specters, striking where no one expected. Convoys vanished into hyperspace corridors, only to reappear in enemy formations' blind spots, unleashing destruction in bursts so precise that the oldest tacticians swore it could not be planned. Alien analysts, accustomed to centuries of uncontested domination, could only watch, helpless, as the balance of power tilted imperceptibly but inexorably. Each maneuver, each strike, betrayed an understanding of war that was more than instinct. It was evolution in real time. Humans were adapting, learning, transforming desperation into opportunity, chaos into art. Every defeat, every destruction seemed to sharpen them. The very laws of probability bent beneath the weight of their audacity.
Observers cataloged contradictions they could not reconcile. Humans were fragile yet enduring, reckless yet cunning, chaotic yet bonded by an unspoken cohesion. Fleets that should have been annihilated reformed overnight, often stronger, faster, and more cunning than before. Planets liberated from siege became symbols, monuments of resistance rather than mere territory. Each victory, no matter the scale, was amplified through communications channels the aliens could not fully disrupt, broadcast as a statement to the galaxy. Humanity refused to bow, refused to vanish, and refused to be underestimated. Amid the violence, a more startling pattern emerged: compassion. Humans spared captives when it was unnecessary, treated the wounded even in the heart of battle, and honored their dead with rituals, ceremonies, and memorials, even as orbitals burned overhead. The observers were perplexed.
How could a species capable of such destruction also act with mercy, empathy, and purpose? This was a species whose weapon was not only technology, firepower, or numbers, but something more profound: an enduring spirit that thrived in adversity, that adapted faster than any calculation could predict, and that inspired loyalty, courage, and fear in equal measure. Entire fleets hesitated, unsure how to respond. Some commanders began to doubt their own judgment, revisiting every tactic, every assumption. It was no longer enough to possess the greatest ships, the most advanced weapons, or the deepest experience. Humanity had introduced an element no empire had foreseen: unpredictability born of principle, ingenuity born of desperation, and courage born of collective defiance. Every strike, every maneuver was not random. It was deliberate, meaningful. Humans chose not just to fight, they chose to define the terms of engagement. They fought with intent, broadcasting victories to distant systems as proof that survival was not enough. Influence, moral defiance, and audacious strategy mattered more. The tide had turned, not because of superior technology or numbers, but because of will, spirit, and relentless adaptation. Alien observers began to whisper among themselves, and not just with fear. Awe threaded their voices. What they had dismissed as a fragile species had revealed an intelligence that transcended standard calculation, a species capable of shaping its own destiny under fire, redefining strategy in mid-battle, and inspiring not only terror, but admiration across the stars. The humans' rise was subtle, almost invisible, yet impossible to deny. An uprising that had begun in desperation now radiated as inevitability. And in the deep, silent reaches of space, fleets once confident of dominance hesitated. Entire sectors paused in the face of a species they could no longer predict. The humans had become more than survivors. They were arbiters of their own fate, architects of a new order, and heralds of a reckoning no empire could fully contain. The tide had shifted, the galaxy had felt it, and somewhere, in the darkness between the stars, humanity prepared the next strike, calm, deliberate, and unstoppable. The war was no longer about defense. It was about rewriting the rules entirely, and the first tremors of that upheaval were only beginning. In the hidden chambers of alien space, far from prying sensors and civilian eyes, the galaxy's most powerful leaders gathered. The halls were dim, lit by gold panels of data streaming in ceaselessly from the fringes of human-influenced space. Screens flickered with movement that no logic could fully anticipate. Convoys destroyed before they should have been attacked. Stations rigged to self-destruct at precise intervals. Entire fleets disappearing into hyperspace, only to reappear in locations no sensor could have predicted. The council was silent at first, each member staring at the reports as if the data itself were a threat. Probability matrices, tactical simulations, and centuries of accumulated strategy all failed to account for the humans' actions. Whispers threaded through the chamber, voices taut with tension. "They should not exist here," said one, a veteran of a dozen planetary sieges. "They defy everything we know about warfare," murmured another. "Fear, carefully concealed for public consumption, throbbed in the air like a living entity. The humans were no longer a mere species to be catalogued or dismissed. They were a phenomenon, a force that altered perception itself. Every attack, every maneuver, carried a signature of instinct, courage, and audacity that was almost sentient. Council members debated strategies they had once considered infallible, only to realize they were irrelevant against a species that did not play by conventional rules. Alliances, reinforcements, intimidation, all were ineffective against the human mind. It was not power that humans wielded most effectively. It was unpredictability, fused with principle and ingenuity. Across the void, the humans continued unaware of the scrutiny their every action commanded. They did not calculate for fear or reputation. They acted on instinct, principle, and sheer will. Each strike, whether small or devastating, rippled through alien space in ways that no empire could fully anticipate. Analysts recorded patterns that suggested emergent intelligence, innovation born of desperation, improvisation that bordered on genius, coordination that no formal hierarchy could produce. The humans adapted at speeds that dwarfed any known species, turning every mistake, every misstep into advantage. The Council recognized, with growing unease, that no fleet, no alliance, no centuries of planning could ensure victory. Humans operated on a plane the galaxy had rarely encountered, a species whose mind and spirit were inseparable from its actions, whose morality and audacity intertwined with every tactical decision. Observation alone revealed something far more profound than mere strategy. It revealed a being whose survival instinct was inseparable from its identity, a species for whom endurance, defiance, and initiative were not optional. They were fundamental. A debate erupted in whispers, a tension-laden dance of ego, fear, and wonder. "We cannot predict them," one counselor said, voice trembling. "We cannot crush them with might." Another voice countered, rational, cold. "Then we escalate, we annihilate." But the first voice prevailed, not by logic, but by recognition. There is a path we do not understand. They will not yield, and we cannot force them to. In that realization, fear gave way to respect, and in that respect, awe began to bloom. Observers, strategists, and leaders alike felt the weight of an unsettling truth. Humans were more than combatants.
They were an anomaly, the unpredictable constant in a universe governed by rules and probabilities. Their persistence, ingenuity, and moral audacity were forces no empire had accounted for. The Council's chambers fell into tense silence again, each member contemplating the implications. A species thought weak, isolated, and trivial had forced the galaxy's most powerful empires to reconsider their assumptions. Alliances wavered, strategies were rewritten mid-conference, fleets hesitated in orbit, unsure whether to strike or withdraw. Humanity's mere existence had become a question, a challenge, and a warning. Across human space, life continued with its familiar chaos. Ships moved, stations operated, people fought, rebuilt, and endured. But all of it now had consequences that stretched far beyond their awareness. Each action, whether small or monumental, resonated in alien councils, altering decisions and perceptions far from the battlefield. Humanities were not merely surviving, they were reshaping the galaxy's understanding of what a species could be. In somewhere, unseen, the Council realized that no matter how many ships they deployed, no matter how precise their calculations, no matter how unyielding their fleets, they could not fully control the outcome. The humans had become the anomaly, a force that could not be predicted, contained, or erased. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what this relentless, audacious, and defiant species would do next. Somewhere between fear and awe, the Council came to an uncomfortable consensus. Humanity was no longer a problem to be solved. It was a phenomenon to be reckoned with. And somewhere, in the depths of human-controlled space, the humans prepared to strike again, unknowingly shaping the thoughts and strategies of powers across the stars. The next move would not merely be a battle, it would be a revelation. History, as it would be recorded by alien observers, did not remember this war as the rise of a species to galactic power. It remembered it as the moment the galaxy was forced to learn restraint, humility, and reverence.
The humans did not conquer through overwhelming fleets or advanced technology. They did not crush their enemies under the weight of numbers or ancient cunning. They did something far more unsettling. They endured, defied, and inspired, and in doing so, revealed truths alien civilizations had long ignored. Survival was not the ultimate measure of worth. Principle, courage, and moral will could surpass centuries of experience, entire armadas, and weapons beyond imagination. From the vantage points of orbiting stations, alien analysts observed impossible choices. Humanities spared entire civilizations, not out of weakness, but to deliver a warning, to demonstrate a capacity for mercy that was also a strategy.
Alliances were formed in moments of crisis, sometimes between humans who barely knew one another, sometimes with unlikely extraterrestrial allies, forged through necessity and trust rather than politics. Every tactical decision, every engagement, carried moral as well as strategic weight. No one could predict the humans' next move, not because they were erratic, but because they operated on a plane that valued principle as much as probability, instinct as much as calculation. The danger humans posed was not in missiles or armor, but in unpredictability. They refused to act as expected. They defy assumptions at every turn. Fleets that had assumed victory hesitated in their wake. Commands that were designed to intimidate failed to account for human ingenuity. In their defiance, humans inspired fear, admiration, and hesitation simultaneously, and these emotions rippled across empires like gravitational waves. Even the most seasoned tacticians felt unease when faced with a species whose choices were guided by will and morality rather than convenience or self-preservation. Observers documented acts that would endure in memory far longer than the battles themselves. Entire cities reconstructed under bombardment to strike anew. Civilians armed themselves with whatever could be repurposed into weapons. Scientists and engineers improvised on a scale that no theoretical model could account for. And yet, in moments of triumph, humans exercised compassion. Injured enemies were treated, fallen adversaries honored, and acts of restraint became as strategic as strikes of fury. To the galaxy, this was incomprehensible, unsettling, and undeniably awe-inspiring. They had refused to be small in any sense, socially, strategically, morally, or spiritually, and in that refusal, they had altered the galaxy's understanding of life itself. And somewhere, beyond the last recorded battle, in the quiet aftermath of destruction and resilience, the humans remained. They rebuilt, they healed, they endured. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for the simple, unyielding principle that had carried them across fire and darkness. To exist, to resist, and to leave a mark upon the universe that could not be erased. The galaxy had met them, it had underestimated them, and now, even in the silence after war, it understood that some species could rise not by dominance, but by refusing to be small. And humanity, as always, would endure.